The piece of paper taped to my front door was neon orange, not a subtle, "Hey, you missed a package, Peach," or a polite, "We're doing roadwork," yellow. It was a radioactive, aggressive, retinas burning orange that screamed, "You are a criminal, and the whole neighborhood knows it." I stood there on my porch, keys dangling from my hand, staring at the bold, all-caps font that had been assaulted by a laser printer running low on toner. Notice of violation, Class B. Offense, unauthorized window treatment color. Fine, $150 per day until remedied. I blinked. I looked at the window to the right of the door. I looked back at the paper. Then I looked at the window again. Hanging there, innocent and motionless behind the double-pane glass, were my curtains. They were white. They were undeniably, scientifically, boringly white. Sauerint. They were the kind of white you buy when you have no imagination and just want to block the sun so you can watch football without a glare on the TV. They were the generic brand paper towel of curtains. I ripped the tape off the door, taking a chunk of the finish with it, add that to the list of things I'd eventually get fined for, and marched down my driveway. I didn't even need to look for her. I knew she was near. A violation notice this fresh meant the predator was still in the area, likely circling back to admire the kill. And there she was, Linda, the president of the Oak Creek Homeowners Association, a woman who treated the subdivision of 3-bedroom suburban houses like it was the Vatican, and she was the Pope. If the Pope wore floral print capris and had a haircut that defied gravity through the sheer power of hairspray and spite, she was standing 3 driveways down, measuring the length of the Hendersons' grass with a literal ruler. "Linda!" I shouted. She didn't jump. She didn't turn quickly. She rotated slowly, like a tank turret acquiring a target. She adjusted her sunglasses, oversized tortoise-shell monstrosities that made her look like a judgmental insect, and offered me a tight, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good afternoon, Mark," she said. Her voice was sugary, but it was the kind of sugar that rots your teeth instantly. "I trust you received the correspondence?" I waved the neon orange flag of surrender in the air. "Correspondence? You taped a ransom note to my door. What is this? Unauthorized window treatment?" "Linda, they're white curtains. I bought them at Target. The package said white." "Not off-white. Not cream. Just white." She sighed, closing her eyes as if my stupidity was physically painful for her. She tucked her ruler into her oversized tote bag, which I assumed was filled with the crushed dreams of children and homeowners. She began the slow walk toward my driveway, her sandals slapping against the asphalt with a rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack that sounded like a countdown clock. "Mark, Mark, Mark," she tutted, stopping at the edge of my lawn. She never stepped on the grass. She knew that would be a violation of Bylaw 8.4 regarding unnecessary foot traffic on manicured sod. "Don't mark. Mark! Mark me, Linda! Look at the window!" I pointed. "Tell me what color that is." She lowered her sunglasses, peering over the rim. She squinted at my living room window. "It's clearly ivory," she said, the word dripping with disdain. "Ivory? Are you insane? It's white cotton." "It has a yellow undertone," she corrected, pulling a thick binder from her bag. This was the book. The covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The CC and Rs. The Bible of Oak Creek. She flipped it open with practiced efficiency, landing on page 42 before I could even blink. "Section 4, paragraph 2, subsection C," she recited, not even looking at the text. She had it memorized. "All window coverings visible from the streetscape must be pure white or bright white. This is to ensure a uniform, clean aesthetic for the community. Colors such as cream, ivory, eggshell, beige, or alabaster are strictly prohibited as they suggest aging or lack of maintenance." She looked up at me, triumph glinting in her eyes. "Your curtains, Mark, are creating a dingy appearance. It lowers the property value of the entire block. Honestly, it looks like you smoke inside." I felt a vein in my forehead begin to throb. "I don't smoke." And nobody thinks my curtains look dingy except for you. I paid $500 for those drapes." "Then you paid $500 to break the law," she said simply. She tapped the orange paper in my hand. "You have 48 hours to remove them. After that, the fine increases to $300 a day for willful non-compliance. Have a blessed day, Mark." She turned and walked away, thwack, 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 heading toward the Hendersons' house to presumably tell them their grass was 3 millimeters too high. I stood there, vibrating with rage. I looked at my curtains. The sun was hitting them. Maybe if I squinted, and if I had suffered a severe concussion recently, they looked warm, maybe a little soft, but ivory? Dingy? This was a power trip. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was about Linda needing to feel like she owned the street. I walked back into my house, slammed the front door, and threw the orange paper onto the kitchen counter. I walked into the living room and stared at the offending fabric. They were nice curtains, heavy, thermal-lined, good for keeping the heat out. I grabbed the hem of one and held it up to the white trim of the windowsill. Okay. Technically, the trim was a stark, glossy white, and the curtains were a soft, matte white. There was a difference detectable only by the Hubble telescope or a woman with too much time on her hands. But a difference nonetheless. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, cracked it open, and sat on the couch, staring at the window. I had two choices. Choice A, I could fight it. I could go to the monthly meeting, stand up during the open forum, and argue the semantics of the visible light spectrum. I could bring paint swatches. I could bring a spectral analyzer. But I knew how that would end. Linda controlled the board. The board was comprised of Linda, her best friend Karen, yes, actually named Karen, and a guy named Jerry, who I'm pretty sure was asleep for every meeting since 2018. I would lose. Choice B, I could comply. I could take down the curtains, go back to the store, buy the blindingly bright, hospital-grade white curtains that looked like sheets stolen from an asylum, and hang them up. I took a long sip of beer. I was a rational man. I was a project manager for a logistics company. I dealt with problems for a living. The path of least resistance was choice B. It would cost me maybe $200 and an afternoon. It was the adult thing to do. I finished the beer. I crushed the can. I was going to do choice B. I was going to be a good neighbor. I was going to give Linda exactly what she wanted. Pure, unadulterated compliance. The next morning, I took the day off work. Not specifically for the curtains, but I told myself I needed a mental health day. The health part was debatable, considering I spent the first 2 hours of it seething in the aisle of a bed bath and beyond. I was holding 2 different packages of white curtains. One was labeled Snow, and the other was labeled Arctic. "Can I help you find something?" a teenage employee asked. He looked tired. He had no idea he was stepping into a minefield. "Which one of these is whiter?" I asked, holding them up. He blinked. They look the same to me, man." "They can't be the same," I snapped, slightly too aggressive. "One is Snow, one is Arctic. Linda will know the difference. Linda sees wavelengths of light that human beings aren't supposed to process." The kid took a step back. "Okay, the Arctic one looks brighter, I guess? Good, give me 6 panels." I bought the Arctic white curtains. They were polyester. They felt cheap. They were so white they actually hurt my eyes under the fluorescent store lights. They were perfect. I spent the afternoon taking down my ivory offenses. I packed them away in a box, feeling a strange sense of loss. They were good curtains. They tied the room together. Now, I was putting up these monstrosities. By 4 p.m., the new curtains were up. My living room looked sterile. It looked like an examination room. It lacked warmth. It lacked character. But by God, it was white. I went outside to the curb to inspect my work. From the street, the windows looked like blank sheets of paper. It was aggressive. It was compliant. It was over. I took a picture of the house, texted it to the HOA emergency number, which went directly to Linda's iPad, and captioned it, "Remedied, pure white. Please confirm." I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. My phone buzzed. "Linda. Better. But please ensure the pleats are uniform. The one on the far left looks bunched. We want a tailored look, Mark." I stared at the phone. I laughed. A short, dry, humorless bark of a laugh. Oh, She couldn't just say, okay. She had to comment on the pleating. I went inside and fixed the pleat. I sat down. I thought it was over. 2 days later, another neon orange paper appeared on my door. Notice of violation, Class B. Offense, non-compliant texture transparency. Fine. $300. Repeat offender surcharge. I didn't walk to her house this time. I waited for her to do her rounds. I sat on a lawn chair in my driveway, beer in hand, like a sentry guarding the gates of hell. She came around the corner at 5:15 p.m. She saw me. She didn't falter. She walked right up to the edge of the driveway. Problem, Mark? You tell me, Linda, I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. I bought the white curtains. I bought the Arctic white. They are whiter than your teeth. They are whiter than the lies you tell yourself about being a beloved community leader. What is the problem? She sighed, clutching her clipboard. Mark, while the color is technically compliant, the material is not. At night, when your lights are on, the transparency of the cheap fabric creates a silhouette effect. We can see the outline of your furniture. It looks cluttered. Furthermore, the fabric has a waffle weave texture. The bylaws state smooth satin or tight weave finish. The waffle texture catches the streetlights and creates shadows that look messy. I stood up slowly. You're fining me for texture? For shadows? We are fining you for failing to maintain the standard, she said. Bylaw 4.2, C. It's all in the book, Mark. Maybe if you read it, we wouldn't have to keep having these little chats. She smiled that tight. Venomous smile. You have 24 hours to remove the textured drapes, and since this is a second offense, the fine stands. She walked away. Thwack, thwack, thwack. I went inside. I didn't slam the door. I closed it very, very gently. I walked to the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee. I cleared the dining room table. I went to my office and retrieved the binder. The thick, dusty binder they gave me when I bought the house 5 years ago. The CC and R's. I sat down. I cracked my knuckles. Okay, Linda, I whispered to the empty room. You want to play by the book? Let's read the book. I read until my eyes burned. I read through dinner. I read through midnight. I highlighted. I used sticky notes. I cross-referenced via Google. The language was archaic. It was repetitive. It was restrictive. It banned pink flamingos. Then there are. It banned above-ground pools. It banned working on cars in the driveway. It banned window coverings that weren't white. Window coverings. That was the phrase. Over and over again. Window coverings, curtains, blinds, shutters, drapes. All window coverings visible from the street must be white. I kept reading. I was looking for the definition of a window. Section 8.1. Architectural integrity. Homeowners are responsible for the maintenance and repair of all glass surfaces. Windows must be kept clean and free of cracks. Section 8.2. Replacements. Replacement of windows must be consistent with the architectural style of the home, modern colonial. Frames must be white vinyl or painted wood. I scanned down. No stickers, decals, or temporary signs may be affixed to the glass. Okay, no stickers. But what about the glass itself? I turned to the section on stained glass. Surely there was a ban on stained glass. I found it. Section 8.5. Lead light or stained glass accents in entry doors are permitted provided they are tasteful and abstract. No religious symbols or text. Entry doors. Okay. What about main windows? I scoured the pages. I looked for living room, picture window, facade. Nothing. There was absolutely nothing in the bylaws that prohibited the glass itself from being colored. The rules were entirely focused on what hung behind the glass, curtains, or what was stuck to the glass, decals. The bylaws assumed that windows were clear. They assumed that if you wanted privacy, you used a covering. But what if the window was the privacy? I leaned back in my chair. The sun was coming up. I was exhausted, wired on caffeine, and smiling like a maniac. The rule said window coverings must be white. It did not say windows must be clear. It did not say the glass cannot be art. And it definitely didn't say You cannot replace your standard double-pane glass with a custom, permanent, leaded glass architectural installation depicting the descent of the soul into eternal damnation. I grabbed my phone. It was 6 a.m. I searched for custom stained glass artists near me. I scrolled past the hobbyists making sun catchers on Etsy. I needed a professional. I needed someone who worked with structural glass, someone who could replace a 6-foot by 8-foot picture window. I found a website that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2004. The background was black. The text was red. The header said, "Vinny's Glass and Iron." If it breaks, we fix it. If it ain't broke, we make it pretty. There were photos of church restorations, dive bar windows, and what appeared to be a glass portrait of a bulldog wearing a tuxedo. I dialed the number. It rang 7 times. A voice that sounded like it had been gargling gravel answered. "Yeah? Vinny's." "Vinny," I said. "My name is Mark. I have a rush job. It's a big window, a residential picture window." "I'm booked out 3 months, pal," Vinny grunted. "I'm willing to pay double," I said, "and it's a spite project against an HOA. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. Then I heard the sound of a lighter flicking and a deep inhale. "Spite, huh?" Vinny's voice changed. It got warmer. "I hate HOAs. My HOA fined me for having a birdhouse that was too rustic." "What are we talking, abstract? Geometric?" "No," I said, looking out the window at Linda's house across the street. "Figurative. Highly detailed. I need a scene." "What scene?" "Have you ever read Dante's Inferno?" Vinny chuckled. It was a wet, rattling sound. "The Divine Comedy? Hell yeah. I did a purgatorio for a biker club in Jersey once. Which circle are we doing?" "All of them," I said, "but mostly the 8th circle, the fraudulent, and I have specific reference photos for the faces of the sinners." "I'm listening," Vinny said. "I can be there in an hour." Vinny arrived in a van that looked like it had survived a war zone. It was a rusted Ford Econoline with Vinny's Glass spray-painted on the side in what I hoped was stencil, but feared was freehand. Vinny himself was a mountain of a man. He wore a stained white tank top, cargo shorts, and leather work boots. He had a gray ponytail and tattoos that looked like they were done in a prison kitchen. He walked into my living room, ignored my outstretched hand, and walked straight to the window. He tapped the glass. "Cheap builder grade," he scoffed. "Thermal seal is probably blown anyway. You're doing yourself a favor replacing this garbage." He pulled out a tape measure. 84 inches by 96. Big glass, heavy glass. We're going to need to reinforce the frame. He turned to me. "All right, show me the inspiration." I opened my laptop. I had prepared a PowerPoint. "Okay," I said. "This is Linda." I pulled up a photo of her from the neighborhood newsletter. She was pointing at a pothole with a scowl. Vinny nodded. "Good bone structure for a demon. Sharp nose, pointy chin. We can work with that." "I want her here," I said, pointing to the center of the design I had roughly sketched. "She needs to be in the center of the composition, maybe submerged in pitch or being poked by devils." "Classic Inferno is pitch," Vinny said, scratching his beard. "But for visual impact, fire, lots of reds and oranges. Maybe she's holding a clipboard. The irony of bureaucracy and hell?" "Yes," I said. "A burning clipboard. And here..." I swiped to the next photo. "This is Jerry, the treasurer. He sleeps through meetings." "Sloth," Vinny said immediately. "We put him in the mud, asleep while the swamp consumes him. Blues and murky greens." "And Karen," I showed the picture of Linda's sidekick. "She's the one who reports people for leaving their trash bins out 10 minutes too long." "Treachery," Vinny decided. "Frozen in ice, but looking judgmental about it. Cold blues. Sharp shards of white." Vinny grabbed a sketch pad from his back pocket. He started drawing with a charcoal pencil. His hands, thick and calloused, moved with surprising delicacy. In 5 minutes, he had a rough composition that looked like a heavy metal album cover mixed with a Renaissance masterpiece. "The glass," Vinny said, looking up. It's gotta be opaque enough that you don't need curtains, screw their curtains, but translucent enough that the sun lights it up from the outside during the day, and your indoor lights blast it out to the street at night. Can we do that? Cathedral glass, Vinny said. Opalescent. You can't see through it, but it glows. From the street, it'll look like a glowing mural. From inside, it'll look like you live inside a kaleidoscope. How much? I asked. Vinny looked at the sketch, then at the window, then at Linda's house across the street. Materials and labor, usually this is a $10,000 job. But because I want to see the look on that lady's face, $7,000, half up front. I wrote the check immediately. One condition, Vinny said, tearing the check from my hand. I need total creative control on the demons. I want to make them look like landscapers. You know, blowing leaves into their faces for eternity. Vinny, I said, you are an artist. The fabrication took 3 weeks. During that time, I paid the daily fines for my waffle texture curtains without complaint. I sent the checks with little smiley faces drawn on the memo line. Linda must have thought she had broken me. She stopped stopping by. She thought she had won. She had no idea. When Vinny called to say the panels were ready, I felt a thrill of adrenaline that I usually only associated with extreme sports or tax evasion. We install tomorrow, Vinny said. It's gonna be loud. We gotta rip the old frame out. You might want to warn the neighbors. I'm not warning anyone, I said. The next morning, Vinny's van pulled up, followed by a second truck carrying the scaffolding. At 8 a.m. sharp, the sawzall started. Zzzt! The sound of a reciprocating saw cutting through vinyl and drywall echoed through the cul-de-sac like a scream. I stood on the lawn, drinking coffee. Linda's front door flew open within 30 seconds. She came storming out in a silk robe, her hair in rollers. Mark! She shrieked over the noise of the saw. What in God's name is happening? It's 8 a.m. Construction crews are not permitted to exceed 60 decibels before 9 a.m. Read the bylaws again, Linda, I shouted back, checking my watch. Construction hours are 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays. I waited until 8 o'clock to be polite. She marched over, her slippers wet from the morning dew. She looked at Vinny, who was currently ripping a chunk of window frame out of the wall with a crowbar. You do not have a permit for this, she yelled. Exterior modifications require Architecture Review Committee approval. You need to submit a form. There's a 30-day waiting period. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Actually, Linda, I said, handing it to her. This is a repair. Bylaw 8.1. Homeowners must repair broken windows immediately to prevent safety hazards. My window was compromised, drafty, burnt, structural integrity issues. I'm just fixing it. No permit needed for emergency repairs. She snatched the paper. Replacing a pane of glass is a repair. Ripping out the wall is a renovation. It's a frame replacement, Vinny shouted from the scaffolding. He looked at her, then looked at the sketch taped to the wall next to him. He grinned. It was a terrifying grin. You must be the muse. Linda took a step back. Who is this person? I'm calling the police. You are running an illegal construction site. Go ahead, I said. Call them. She did. 20 minutes later, a squad car rolled up. Officer Miller stepped out. He looked tired. He knew this street. He knew Linda. Morning, Linda. Morning, Mark, Miller said, hitching up his belt. We got a report of illegal industrial manufacturing. He's destroying the facade of the home. Linda pointed a shaking finger at the gaping hole in my house. And that man looks like a convict. Vinny waved the crowbar. Retired lady, Union Glazier. I walked over to Miller. Officer, I'm replacing a window. I have the building permit right here. I handed him the actual city permit I had pulled, which superseded the HOA rules. Miller looked at it. City permit is valid. Everything looks up to code. He turned to Linda. Ma'am, this is a civil matter. If he has a permit, I can't stop him. Unless he starts building a meth lab, he's allowed to fix his window. But look at the size of it, Linda sputtered. What are they putting in there? It's covered in tarps. Indeed. Ja, Vinny had been careful to keep the glass panels wrapped in heavy canvas. "It's a surprise," I said. Miller got back in his car. "Keep the noise down, Mark. Linda, stop calling 911 for construction noise." Linda stood there, fuming, as Vinny and his crew began to hoist the heavy leaded panels into place. They secured them, sealed the frame, and caulked the edges. It took all day. The canvas remained up. "Don't take the cover off until tonight," Vinny told me as he packed up his tools. "You want the full effect." "Oh, I know," I said. "I wired the backlighting like you asked," Vinny added. "It's not just the room lights. I installed a dedicated LED array inside the frame. When you flip that switch, it's going to be visible from space." Vinny slapped me on the shoulder. "It's a masterpiece, kid. Honestly, my best work." He drove off. I waited. I waited for the sun to go down. I waited for the streetlights to flicker on. I waited for Linda to begin her evening patrol. At 8:30 p.m., the street was dark. I saw Linda walking down the sidewalk, her reflective vest on. Safety first. Her flashlight beam sweeping across lawns looking for unauthorized garden gnomes. She reached the front of my house. She stopped. She was staring at the canvas tarp that was still taped over the massive new window. I was inside, standing by the switch. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "Showtime," I whispered. I flipped the switch. Click. It wasn't a click, really. It was a heavy industrial thunk as the breaker engaged the dedicated circuit Vinny had installed. And then there was light. If you have ever stared directly into the high beams of a semi-truck while standing in a dark tunnel, you might have a fraction of an idea of what happened next. But this wasn't just white light. It was color. Violent. Saturated. Biblical color. From inside my living room, the LED array, 50,000 lumens of pure, unadulterated power, blasted against the back of the opal glass. It didn't just illuminate the window, it weaponized it. I heard a gasp from the street. It was a wet, choked sound, like someone had just been punched in the gut. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out onto the porch. The canvas tarp was still hanging over the glass, glowing from behind like a nuclear reactor melting down inside a tent. The silhouette of the lead lines was visible, a jagged, chaotic map of impending doom. Linda was standing on the sidewalk, her hands shielding her eyes, her mouth slightly open. What is that?" she stammered. The glow was so intense it was casting a shadow of her onto the Hendersons' garage across the street. "Mark, turn that off, it's blinding." "It's art, Linda," I shouted, walking down the steps. I grabbed the rope Vinny had left dangling from the corner of the tarp, a quick-release knot he'd rigged up like a stage curtain. "You wanted window treatments? You wanted something that wasn't a cheap textured drape? Well, behold." I yanked the rope. The canvas didn't flutter down. It fell with the heavy finality of a guillotine blade. And there it was, 8 feet tall, 6 feet wide, a masterpiece of lead and luminescence. The street went silent. The crickets stopped chirping. I think even the wind stopped blowing out of respect. The window depicted the 8th circle of hell, inspired by Gustave Doré, but updated for the modern suburban nightmare. The background was a swirling vortex of deep crimsons, burnt oranges, and hellfire yellows. The glass was textured, rippled to look like flowing lava. But the figures... Oh, the figures were the main event. In the center, dominating the composition, was a woman. She was waist-deep in a pool of boiling pitch. She was wearing a floral blazer made of iridescent purple glass. Her hair was a helmet of rigid gray glass that captured the light perfectly. Her face was contorted in a scream of eternal, bureaucratic frustration. In her hand, she held a clipboard that was actively on fire. It was Linda. It was unmistakably, undeniably Linda. Vinny had captured the sneer, the posture, the very essence of her soul. To her left, encased in a block of jagged blue ice, it was a man in a golf shirt. His eyes were closed. He was asleep. It was Jerry, the treasurer. To her right, being poked by a demon with a pitchfork, was a woman holding a pair of binoculars. The demon wasn't a traditional gargoyle. It was wearing a neon yellow safety vest and holding a leaf blower. The woman was Karen. The detail was forensic. The demons were tossing notice of violation slips into the air, which turned into bats as they rose toward the top of the arch. "It's," Linda whispered. She took a step closer, drawn in like a moth to a bug zapper. Her face was bathed in the red glow of her own damnation. "Is that me?" "It's interpretive," I said, beaming. "It represents the struggle of the human spirit against the tyranny of petty authority. It's classical, it's Dante, it's high culture, Linda." "You can't find me for high culture." Doors were opening all up and down the street. The light was so bright it was probably visible from the International Space Station. Neighbors were wandering out in their pajamas, squinting against the glare. Mr. Henderson crossed the street, his dog barking wildly at the glowing window. He looked at the glass. He looked at Linda. He looked back at the glass. A slow grin spread across his face. "Hey," Henderson said, pointing. "Is that Jerry? Why is he blue?" "Circle of Sloth," I announced to the gathering crowd like a museum curator. "Frozen in inaction. And there's Karen, in the clutches of the malicious compliance demons." "This is hate speech," Linda shrieked. The shock had worn off, replaced by the screeching siren of indignation. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling so hard she nearly dropped it. "This is harassment. This is a personal attack. You are depicting members of the board in hell." "I am depicting sinners," I corrected. "If you see yourself in the art, Linda, that's a matter for you and your confessor. Art is a mirror, after all." "Turn it off," she screamed. "Turn it off right now. It's light pollution. It's offensive. It's not white. The window isn't a covering," I yelled back, channeling my inner lawyer. "It is the structural glazing of the home. The bylaws say coverings must be white. There are no coverings here, Linda. I am seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. Or, in this case, hellfire red glasses." She dialed 911. Again. "Yes, I need an officer. It's him again. He's put up a mural of death. It's glowing." "It's frightening the children." I looked around. The only child present was the Hendersons' 12-year-old son, who was filming the window with his phone and saying, "That is so metal." I walked back up to my porch and sat on the railing. I had a front-row seat to the meltdown. The red light cast long, dramatic shadows across the lawn. It felt like I was sitting inside a volcano. It was warm. It was cozy. Officer Miller arrived 10 minutes later. He didn't even turn on his siren. He just pulled up to the curb, turned off his headlights, and sat in his car for a full minute. I could see him through his windshield, just staring at the window. He slowly got out of the car. He adjusted his hat. He walked up the driveway. Linda intercepted him. "Officer Miller, look at it. He's mocking me. He's burning me in effigy." Miller looked at the window. He squinted. He tilted his head. "That's some quality glasswork," Miller said. "Is that leaded?" "It's harassment," Linda wailed. "Ma'am," Miller sighed. "Is it obscene? Are there naked body parts?" "Well, no," Linda admitted. "But the demons are poking Karen." "With leaf blowers," Miller noted. He chuckled. He actually chuckled. "Look, Linda, it's a window. It's on his house. Unless it exceeds the municipal brightness ordinance, which is for commercial signage, by the way, there's nothing I can do. It's freedom of expression. It's an eyesore." "I don't know," Miller said, scratching his chin. "I think it adds a little color to the neighborhood. Everything is so beige around here." He turned to me. "Mark, maybe dim it down a notch after 10 p.m.? For the pilots landing at the airport?" "Will do, officer," I said, saluting. Miller got back in his car. As he drove away, I saw him snap a picture of the house out of his driver's side window. Linda stood on my lawn, trembling. The crowd of neighbors was growing. Someone had brought popcorn. I'm not joking. Mrs. Gable from 3 doors down was eating Pop Secret out of a bowl while staring at the glass version of Karen. "This isn't over, Mark," Linda hissed. Her face was flushed, blending perfectly with the red light radiating from the window. "I am calling an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. on this lawn. You will be fined. You will be sued. We will put a lien on your house so fast your head will spin." "I'll have the coffee ready," I said. The next morning, the sun hit the window from the outside. Vinny was a genius. The opalescent glass didn't just look good at night. In the daylight, it was a dense, shimmering wall of art. You couldn't see in, which gave me total privacy, but the sunlight filtering through cast a kaleidoscopic wash of colors onto my living room floor. My beige carpet was now a mosaic of purple, red, and gold. At 7:55 a.m., I opened my front door. I had set up a card table on the porch. I had a thermos of coffee, and I had a guest. David was my college roommate. He was also a real estate attorney who specialized in unusual property disputes. He drove a Porsche, wore suits that cost more than my car, and possessed a hatred for HOAs that bordered on pathological. When I called him last night and sent him the photo of the window, he drove 3 hours just to be here. "Good morning, gentlemen." "Or ladies," David said smoothly as the board assembled on my lawn. Linda was there. Jerry was there, looking like he'd just woken up, accurate to the art. Karen was there, clutching her pearls. They had brought a folding table of their own and set it up on the grass. "Who is this?" Linda snapped. "This is a closed executive session of the board." "I'm David Gold," David said, sliding a business card across the gap between the porch and the lawn. "I represent Mark in all matters regarding his artistic endeavors. And since you are conducting this meeting on his private property, I am inviting myself." Linda ignored the card. "Mark is in violation of bylaw 8.1, 8.2, 4.2, and the moral decency clause of the community charter. We are voting to impose a retroactive fine of $5,000 and a mandatory removal order." "The contractor has already been called. He will be here at noon to smash that monstrosity." David laughed. It was a cold, terrifying sound. "Linda, Linda, Linda," David said, opening his briefcase. "You're thinking small. You're thinking about bylaws. I'm thinking about federal law." He pulled out a document. "This," David said, holding it up, "is a copyright registration for a work of visual art titled The Suburban Inferno, created by Vincent Vinny Moretti, a recognized artisan. Mark here is merely the custodian of the work." He pulled out another document. "And this is a summary of the Visual Artists' Rights Act of 1990, or VARA. It protects works of recognized stature from destruction, mutilation, or modification. Since this artwork is permanently integrated into the structure of the building, i.e., it is the window itself, you cannot remove it without destroying it. If you order a contractor to smash this window, you are committing a federal crime against the artist's moral rights. Vinny is very litigious. I spoke to him this morning. He's excited to sue you personally, Linda, not the HOA. You." Linda blanched. "That's ridiculous. It's a window. We can regulate windows." "You can regulate maintenance," David countered. "Is it broken? No. Is it leaking? No. Does it violate the white covering rule? No, because there is no covering. It is glass. And nowhere in your CC&Rs, which I read 3 times last night, by the way, very poorly written, does it state that glass must be clear. In fact, Section 8.5 permits stained glass accents. It does not define the size of the accent. In this case, the accent is the whole wall." Jerry spoke up. "But I'm blue. Why am I blue?" "Artistic license," David said. "Now let's talk about the harassment suit we're preparing." "Harassment?" Linda sputtered. "Targeted enforcement," David said, ticking points off on his fingers. "You fined Mark for cream curtains. You fined him for texture. You fined him for shadows. You have created a hostile living environment. Mark has suffered emotional distress. He had to turn his home into a fortress of solitude just to feel safe. If you touch that window, if you levy one more fine, we will file a suit for selective enforcement, harassment, and, since you're using HOA funds to pursue a personal vendetta, breach of fiduciary duty. We will bankrupt the association. Your reserves will be gone. The neighborhood pool? Gone. The landscaping budget? Gone. All to pay for my billable hours." David leaned forward. "And I am very expensive, Linda." The silence on the lawn was heavy. The neighbors, who had once again gathered to watch the show, were murmuring. "She's gonna bankrupt us," Mrs. Gable whispered loudly. "I want the pool." "Linda, drop it," Jerry said, suddenly awake. "I don't want to be sued. I just want to go back to bed." "But look at it." Linda pointed at the window. In the daylight, her glass likeness was staring judgmentally at her real self. It was a meta-crisis of infinite proportions. "I think it's nice," Karen said quietly. Everyone looked at her. "I mean, the leaf blower demon is sort of cute." Linda threw her clipboard down. It hit the grass. It didn't burst into flames, which was a disappointment, but the symbolism was there. "Fine," she screamed. "Fine. Keep your ugly window. Keep your hell house. But don't expect to be invited to the Christmas block party." "Linda," I called out as she stomped away. "I'm Jewish. I've never gone to the Christmas block party." She didn't look back. She marched to her house, slammed the door, and presumably closed all her blinds so she wouldn't have to see her own burning effigy staring back at her. David closed his briefcase. "My work here is done. That'll be $2,000, Mark." "Worth every penny," I said. 2 months later. The neighborhood has changed. Not a lot, but enough. Linda resigned as president, citing stress and medical reasons. Jerry took over. He hasn't called a meeting in 6 weeks. The grass in the common areas is a little long, but nobody cares. My window has become a local landmark. I catch people slowing down as they drive by to take photos. I've heard rumors that the teenagers in the area call my house the Cathedral of Cool. I was sitting in my living room on a Saturday morning. The sun was streaming through the glass. The light filtered through the red and orange panels, bathing the room in a warm, amber glow. It was peaceful. It was quiet. I sipped my coffee. I looked at the floor, where the shadow of Linda's face was projected onto my rug. I placed my foot squarely on her nose. I picked up the HOA newsletter that had been shoved in my mailbox. There was a new rule proposed by the new Architectural Committee. Section 9, Lawn Ornamentation. To preserve the natural aesthetic, no garden gnomes, statues, or sculptures exceeding 2 feet in height are permitted. I lowered the paper. I looked out my beautiful, hellish window at my front lawn. It was empty. It was green. It was a blank canvas. 2 feet in height? That was the limit? I pulled out my phone. I dialed Vinny. "Vinny, it's Mark. Hey, the Dante guy, how's the glass?" "The glass is perfect," I said. "But I have a new project. I need a sculpture." "What kind?" "Well," I said, watching Linda's replacement, Jerry, walk by. "The rules say no statues over 2 feet tall, but they don't say anything about width or depth." "I'm listening," Vinny said. "How do you feel about a 20-foot-long, 1-foot-tall, intricate bronze casting of a giant snake eating a suburban housewife? We can run it along the entire perimeter of the flower bed." Vinny laughed. The sound was like a cement mixer full of gravel. "I'll be there in an hour." The thing about malicious compliance is that it's an addiction. You start with a small dopamine hit, like wearing a neon pink tie because the dress code only specifies ties must be worn. And before you know it, you're hiring industrial artisans to turn your front lawn into a monument of spite. Vinny's van rattled into the driveway exactly 58 minutes after I hung up the phone. He hopped out, looking like he'd already been awake for 3 days. He was holding a sketchbook in one hand and a terrifyingly large pair of bolt cutters in the other. "I had a vision on the drive over," Vinny announced, bypassing a greeting entirely. He slammed the sketchbook onto the hood of his van. "You said 20 feet long. I say we go bigger. I say we encircle the whole damn flower bed, a perimeter of judgment." I looked at the sketch. It wasn't just a snake. It was a leviathan, a scaled, twisting nightmare of bronze and rebar that looked like it was slithering out of the earth itself. Its mouth was unhinged, wide enough to swallow a mid-sized sedan, but, crucially, the top of its head was drawn level with a dotted line labeled 23.5 inches. "The limit is 24 inches, I reminded him. "If it hits 24.1, Jerry will write me up." He's sleepy, Vinny, but he has a laser measure. "Precision engineering," Vinny scoffed, lighting a cigarette and ashing it into my hydrangeas. "We cast it in sections. We sink the belly into the mulch. The highest point, the dorsal fin, right here. We keep it 23 inches. Safe zone. But the length? There's no law against length, right? I checked 3 times, I said, grinning. Height restrictions apply to vertical structures. There is no restriction on horizontal footprint, other than the property line setback. Vinny cracked his knuckles. Then we're building the Great Wall of Snake. I'm gonna need more scrap metal, and maybe a welder. Construction began on a Tuesday. If the stained glass window was a surgical strike, this was a siege. Vinny brought a crew this time. 2 guys named Sal and Tiny, who was roughly the size of a vending machine, spent the morning digging a trench around my flower beds. They weren't planting petunias. They were laying a rebar foundation. The sound of arc welders crackling filled the cul-de-sac. Zzzz-zzzit crack. Jerry, the new HOA president, emerged from his house around 11 a.m. He was wearing a bathrobe and holding a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Golfer." He walked halfway down his driveway, looked at Tiny, who was currently bending a steel pipe with his bare hands, and just stopped. He watched for a solid minute. Then he turned around and went back inside. Jerry knew when he was outmatched. But Linda? Linda couldn't stay away. She was no longer on the board, but she was still the spiritual leader of the Let's Make Mark's Life Hell coalition. She appeared at the edge of my lawn at noon, disguised as a casual walker. She was wearing a visor and holding 2 one-pound dumbbells, pumping her arms aggressively. "Gardening, Mark?" she called out. Her voice was thin, strained. She was trying to look past Vinny's van to see what was happening in the trench. "Landscaping," I yelled back over the sound of a grinder. "Just adding some borders. You know how important curb appeal is." "It looks industrial," she yelled, eyeing a pile of rusted gears and automotive transmission chains that Vinny had dumped on a tarp. "It's steampunk rustic," I shouted. "Very trendy. It's all the rage in, Berlin." She narrowed her eyes. "Remember the height restriction, Mark. Section 9, no statues over 2 feet. "I have a ruler right here, Linda. We are compliant." She huffed and power walked away. I turned to Vinny. "She's suspicious." "Let her be," Vinny muttered, welding a motorcycle chain onto the spine of the metal beast. "Suspicion breeds fear. Fear breeds respect. Hand me that blowtorch." It took 4 days. 4 days of grinding, welding, and pouring concrete. The result was hideous. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the Ouroboros of Oak Creek. The sculpture snaked around the entire perimeter of my front garden, nearly 60 feet of continuous metal. Vinny had constructed it out of recycled junk. The scales were old saw blades, dull mostly. The eyes were red reflectors taken from a bicycle. The teeth were spark plugs. It looked like a cyborg anaconda that had crawled out of a landfill to seek revenge on humanity. And it was low. It hugged the ground, twisting and undulating through the mulch. At no point did it rise above knee height. It was essentially the world's most aggressive garden edging. The pièce de résistance was the head. It was positioned right at the corner of the driveway, mouth open, facing the street. Inside the open mouth, Vinny had welded a small, flat platform. "What's the platform for?" I had asked him during the build. "Offerings," Vinny had said cryptically. On Friday afternoon, the inspection team arrived. Jerry had been forced into action by Linda, who was standing on her porch with binoculars. Jerry walked up the driveway, clutching a tape measure like a weapon he didn't know how to use. "Mark," Jerry said wearily, "we've had complaints about the metalworm." "It's a serpent, Jerry. A symbol of rebirth. Very spiritual." Jerry sighed. He knelt down next to the highest point of the snake's arched back. He extended the tape measure. He squinted. 23 inches, he read. "Check the head," Linda screamed from across the street. "Check the head, Jerry. It looks tall." Jerry groaned. He shuffled over to the head. He measured from the pavement to the tip of the spark plug fang. 23.5 inches, Jerry shouted back. I crossed my arms. "Is there a problem, Mr. President?" Jerry retracted the tape. He looked at the 60 feet of rusted metal encircling my pansies. He looked at the red reflector eyes staring into his soul. "Technically," Jerry said, rubbing his temples, "the bylaws don't mention width or length, or aesthetic terror? Exactly, I said. It's a garden border. It keeps the mulch in. It looks like it eats children, Jerry noted. It only eats crabgrass, I lied. Jerry stood up. I'm marking it as compliant. I'm going back to bed. Please don't add wings to it. Wings would violate the height restriction, I said solemnly. I'm a law-abiding citizen, Jerry. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had won the war of the lawn, but the universe, and Vinny, had one more card to play. That night a storm rolled in. A heavy, summer thunderstorm with thunder that rattled the windows. I was sitting in my living room, enjoying the glow of my Inferno window, when a bolt of lightning flashed. For a split second, the street was illuminated, and I saw it. Vinny had applied a coating to the snake, a coating he hadn't told me about, retro-reflective industrial paint. When the lightning hit it, the snake didn't just sit there, it glowed. A spectral, ghostly silver light erupted from the flower bed. It looked like the skeleton of a dragon was electrifying on my lawn. I ran to the window. A car was driving down the street, probably a delivery driver. As his headlights swept across my yard, the snake flared up in the darkness, 60 feet of glowing, reflective predator. The driver slammed on his brakes. The car skidded slightly. He sat there for a moment, bathing the snake in light, watching it shine back at him with the intensity of 1,000 road signs. Then, slowly, he drove away. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Vinny. Vinny. Forgot to mention, I used that high-vis stuff they put on highway dividers. Safety first. Can't have people tripping over it in the dark. You're welcome. I laughed. I laughed until my sides hurt. The next morning, I went out to get the paper. There was something in the snake's mouth. I walked over. Resting on the flat platform inside the metal jaws was a small plastic garden gnome. It was one of Linda's. I recognized it. It was the one with the little red hat she kept by her mailbox. I looked across the street. Linda's curtains were drawn tight. I looked at the gnome. It had been placed there, presumably by a neighborhood kid, or maybe, just maybe, by Jerry. In a moment of sleep-deprived rebellion, the snake had claimed its first victim. I left it there. It tied the whole piece together. Epilogue. The color of victory. 3 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't neon orange. It was white, official stationery, Oak Creek Homeowners Association, quarterly newsletter. I scanned the Community Updates section. Due to recent artistic developments in the neighborhood, the board has voted to dissolve the Architectural Review Committee, effective immediately. Homeowners are now encouraged to express their individual styles, provided they do not block emergency vehicle access. I stopped reading. I looked up. Dissolved? They had given up. They had realized that for every rule they wrote, I would find a Vinny. For every height restriction, I would build a labyrinth. They had realized that you cannot legislate against a man who has a project management degree and a petty streak a mile wide. I walked to the window, my beautiful, glowing window, and looked out at my snake. I had won. Complete, total victory. And yet, I felt a strange hollowness. Without the struggle, without the neon orange notes, without the battles, what was I supposed to do? Just live here? Like a normal person? I sipped my coffee. I watched a squirrel run along the spine of the metal serpent. Then, my eyes drifted to the roof. My roof was gray. Boring. Asphalt gray. I remembered reading something in the bylaws a long time ago, section 12.4. Roofing materials must be asphalt, shingle, slate, or cedar shake. It didn't say the shingles had to be one color. I wondered if Vinny knew how to do pixel art with roofing tiles. So, I wondered if I could tile the roof to look like a QR code that, when scanned by a drone, linked to a website dedicated to saving the whales. I picked up my phone. Vinny, it's Mark. How are you with heights? Vinny did not just know how to do pixel art with roofing tiles. Vinny, it turned out, had been waiting his entire professional life for someone to ask him to do pixel art with roofing tiles. It's math, Mark, Vinny said. He was standing on my lawn, looking up at the pitch of my roof with the intensity of a general surveying a battlefield. He held a bratwurst in one hand, it was 9:00 a.m., and a laser rangefinder in the other. A standard asphalt shingle tab is roughly 12 inches wide. Your roof is 40 feet by 25 feet on the street-facing slope. That gives us a grid of roughly 40 by 25 pixels. So, low resolution, sure. But readable? If we use high contrast slate against midnight black, oh yeah, it's readable. The QR code needs to be scannable, I said, shielding my eyes from the morning sun. If a drone flies over, or if Google Earth updates their satellite imagery, I want it to link directly to the website. SaveTheWhales.org? Vinny asked. No, I said. I changed my mind. I bought a domain last night. https://www.google.com/search?Q=Lindiswatching.com. It redirects to a looped GIF of her measuring grass with a ruler. Vinny choked on his bratwurst. He wiped a tear from his eye. You're a sick man. I love it. We start Thursday. Underscore 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 underscore. The neighborhood was in a strange state of ceasefire. Since the dissolution of the Architectural Review Committee, things had gotten eclectic. The Hendersons had painted their mailbox neon green. Mrs. Gable had installed a fountain that looked suspiciously like a peeing cherub, but 20 times larger. But the silence from the board was unnerving. Jerry was ostensibly in charge, but I hadn't seen him. The newsletters had stopped. The fines had stopped. It was the calm before the storm, and I was about to strip the shingles off my roof in the middle of it. Thursday arrived with the rumble of heavy machinery. Vinny didn't just bring a van this time. He brought a dumpster, a hydraulic lift, and a crew of 4 guys who looked like they were auditioning for a Viking raid. "Roofing is loud, Mark," Vinny shouted as he threw a bundle of shingles off the roof. Thud. "It's the song of progress." By noon, my roof was stripped bare. It looked like a wooden skeleton. The exposed plywood was vulnerable, naked. That's when the black SUV pulled up. It wasn't Linda's sedan. It wasn't Jerry's hatchback. It was a matte, black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows and out-of-state plates. It parked directly in front of my driveway, blocking the dumpster. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, thin, and wore a suit that cost more than my car. He had slicked-back gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't look like a suburban dad. He looked like the guy the bank sends to foreclose on an orphanage. He walked up the driveway, ignoring the debris falling from the roof. A shingle landed 2 feet from his polished Oxford shoe. He didn't flinch. "Mr. Reynolds?" he asked. His voice was smooth, like expensive scotch poured over ice. "That's me," I said, wiping sawdust off my hands. "You a friend of Linda's?" "Linda is a legacy asset," the man said. "My name is Sterling Vance. I represent Apex Community Management. We have recently been retained by the Oak Creek Board of Directors to handle high-risk compliance issues." "I'm a high-risk issue?" I asked, flattered. "You are a statistical anomaly," Vance said unblinkingly. "I've reviewed your file, the stained glass, the metal serpent, the litigation threats. You have effectively neutralized the local volunteer board through psychological attrition. Impressive. But amateur hour is over." He pulled a tablet from his jacket pocket. "We are aware you are re-roofing. Standard maintenance. However," he tapped the screen, "we have an injunction. The HOA covenants, which you are so fond of quoting, specify that roofing materials must be uniform in color and composition to the surrounding structures. Section 12.4, subsection B. I smiled. "Actually, Sterling, subsection B says uniform in composition. It says color must be earth tones. Black is an earth tone, gray is an earth tone, slate is an earth tone. I'm using all 3. Vance didn't smile. "We know what you're doing, Mr. Reynolds. We have algorithms that predict homeowner behavior. You are attempting a pattern, a mosaic. We will not allow it." "How are you going to stop me?" I asked. "My roof is naked. If you stop me now and it rains, the water damage is on you. That's a liability tort, Sterling, you know that." Vance looked at the exposed wood. He looked at the heavy gray clouds gathering on the horizon. "Finish the roof," Vance said cold. "But if that pattern constitutes a sign, porn message, or commercial advertisement, we will foreclose. We won't fine you. We won't argue. We will exercise the acceleration clause in your deed restrictions, and we will take your house. Have a pleasant afternoon." He turned, got back in the Escalade, and drove away. I stood there, heart pounding. This wasn't Linda playing checkers. This was chess. "Vinny!" I yelled up at the roof. Vinny peered over the edge, a nail gun in his hand. "Who is the suit?" "The final boss," I said. "We need to change the plan." "No QR code?" Vinny asked, looking disappointed. "No," I said. "If it's a QR code, they'll argue it's a message or a sign. We need something that is technically just a pattern. Something that looks random to the naked eye, but isn't." "Like what?" I thought about it. I thought about Vance and his algorithms. I thought about the uniformity clause. "Dazzle camouflage," I said. Vinny cocked his head. "Like the World War I battleships?" "Exactly," I said. "Geometric shapes, intersecting lines, chaos, high contrast, black and gray. It breaks up the silhouette. It confuses the eye. It's modern art, Vinny, but we're going to embed a hidden image, anaplerotic art. You know those magic eye posters from the 90s? Vinny grinned. "The ones where you have to cross your eyes to see the dolphin?" "Yes," I said, "but no dolphin. I want you to tile the roof so that, from the street, it looks like a jagged, abstract mess of hearth tones. But when viewed from satellite, or a drone at 400 feet. "It says help?" Vinny guessed. "No," I said. "I want it to look like a giant sinkhole. I want it to look like the house is collapsing into the earth. Optical illusion, trompe-l'oeil." "Why?" "Because," I said, watching the empty street where Vance had vanished. "If Apex Management cares about property values, let's see how they like a house that looks like a geological disaster on Google Maps." The tiling took 3 days. It was grueling work. Vinny and his crew had to cut shingles into triangles, trapezoids, and parallelograms. From the street, it looked hideous. It looked like my roof had been attacked by a cubist painter having a seizure. It was a jagged mess of charcoal, slate, and light gray. Linda walked by on day 2. She stopped, stared, and actually smiled. She thought I'd lost my mind. She thought I had ruined my own house. "Looks a bit chaotic, Mark," she called out, unable to hide her glee. "It's deconstructivist," I shouted down from the ladder. "I'm exploring the entropy of suburban decay." "Well, it certainly looks decayed," she laughed, snapping a photo to send to her new overlord, Sterling Vance. But she didn't see the big picture. Literally. On the 3rd day, the last shingle was nailed down. Vinny swept the debris off the gutters. "We need to test it," Vinny said. He pulled a drone case out of his van. "You have a drone?" "I use it to inspect chimneys," Vinny said, "and to spy on my ex-wife's new boyfriend. Don't ask." We stood in the middle of the street. Vinny synced the controller to his phone. The drone whirred to life and shot up into the air. Buzz! We watched the screen on Vinny's phone. The drone climbed. 50 feet. 100 feet. At 100 feet, the roof just looked like a mess. "Go higher," I said. 200 feet. The shapes started to merge. The jagged lines softened. 300 feet. "Holy Mother of God," Vinny whispered. On the screen, my house didn't look like a house anymore. The shading, the forced perspective of the lighter and darker shingles, it worked perfectly. It looked like the center of my roof had caved in, revealing a dark, jagged abyss that went down into the bowels of the earth. It looked like a cavern had opened up to swallow the home. It was terrifyingly realistic. "That is horrifying," I said. "It looks like a bomb went off." "It's beautiful," Vinny wiped a tear. "It's the Mona Lisa of asphalt." I took a screenshot. "Upload it," I said. "Update the Google Maps listing for my address." 2 weeks later. The effect was subtle at first. Drivers would slow down as they passed my house. looking confused. They would look at the roof, squinting. From the street, it was just ugly. They couldn't understand why their GPS, which now showed the updated satellite rendering, thanks to a little algorithmic manipulation by my tech-savvy nephew, showed a black hole where my house should be. Then, the Zillow listing dropped. I wasn't selling, obviously, but the Zestimate is automated. It pulls data from public records and visual data from satellite imagery. I received an email notification. Your home value has been updated. I clicked it. Previous value, $450,000. Current value, $12. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. The algorithm had seen the hole in the roof, interpreted it as catastrophic structural failure, and tanked the value. But here was the kicker. It dragged the neighborhood value down. Comparable sales. The comps. The Hendersons' value dropped 15%. Linda's house, down 20%. The algorithm panicked. Sinkhole activity detected in area, a real estate blog speculated. 3 days later, the black Escalade returned. Sterling Vance did not look smooth this time. His tie was slightly crooked. He marched up my driveway holding a tablet that was displaying a heat map of the local real estate market. It was all deep red. "What have you done?" Vance hissed. He didn't even say hello. "I re-roofed," I said, sitting on my porch swing. "Asphalt shingles, earth tones, uniform composition, it's all in the report, Sterling." "You crashed the algorithm," Vance shouted. "Apex manages 300 homes in this subdivision. Our portfolio value has dropped by $4 million in a week because the satellite AI thinks your house is a crater." "That sounds like a you problem, Sterling. Maybe you should calibrate your AI better. I just like geometric patterns." "Fix it," Vance ordered. "Paint it over, tear it off. I don't care. Make it look like a roof or we will sue you for what?" I stood up. "For painting my roof in a way that confuses a satellite? Show me the bylaw, Sterling. Show me the bylaw that says roof must not trick Skynet." Vance's jaw worked. He was flipping through files on his tablet, scrolling desperately. He couldn't find it, because it didn't exist. "We will pass a special assessment," Vance threatened, his eyes narrowing. "We will rewrite the bylaws. We will ban patterned roofing. We will bankrupt you with legal fees." "You can try," I said. "But right now your portfolio is bleeding. And I have a friend at the local news station who would love to do a story on how a glitch in the algorithm is destroying property values. Or maybe the story is big tech real estate firm bullies man for his artistic roof." Vance froze. He knew the PR nightmare. "What do you want?" Vance asked quietly. I looked at him. I looked at the black Escalade. I looked at Linda's house across the street. "I want a seat on the board," I said. Vance blinked. "Excuse me?" "You dissolved the volunteer committee. You installed a puppet regime. I want in. I want full voting rights. I want veto power on all architectural violations." "That is irregular," Vance said stiffly. "So is a roof that looks like a portal to the underworld," I countered. "Do we have a deal? Or do I go up there and paint a second illusion that looks like a radioactive waste spill?" Vance stared at me. He looked at the roof. He looked at his plummeting Zillow scores. "Fine," he spat. "You're appointed as the member-at-large, effective immediately. Now fix the damn roof." "I'll buy some gray paint tomorrow," I promised. Being inside the HOA board was like being inside the Situation Room, if the Situation Room was run by people whose primary concern was the height of hydrangeas. The meetings were held in a conference room at the Apex regional office. It was sterile, cold, and smelled of ozone. Vance sat at the head of the table. Linda, who was there as a community liaison, much to my annoyance, sat to his right. Jerry was there, sleeping with his eyes open. And me, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops. "Item 1, Vance said, looking at the agenda. "Mrs. Higgins in 4B has a garden gnome that exceeds the height limit." "Denied," I said immediately. Vance looked at me. "Excuse me?" "I veto the violation," I said. "Mrs. Higgins is 80 years old. The gnome is a gift from her grandson. It stays." "The rules are clear," Linda piped up. 2 feet, Mark. It's 26 inches. I move to amend the rule, I said. New rule. Gnomes can be up to 3 feet if they are whimsical in nature. You can't just change the rules, Linda shrieked. Actually, Vance sighed, rubbing his temples, as member-at-large with veto power, he can block enforcement. The gnome stays. Next item. I leaned back in my chair. This was power. This was better than the stained glass. Better than the snake. I was the wrench in the gears. For the next month, I was the Robin Hood of Oak Creek. Someone wanted to paint their door blue? Approved. Someone wanted to park a boat in their driveway for a weekend? Approved. Someone wanted to build a tree house that looked like a pirate ship? Approved, with mandatory safety inspection by Vinny. The neighborhood began to change. It wasn't chaotic. It was alive. The beige uniformity was breaking down, replaced by pops of color and personality. People were actually outside, talking to each other, admiring the pirate ship, laughing at Mrs. Higgins' giant gnome. Vance was furious. But he was trapped. As long as property values were stabilizing, which they were once I painted the roof a boring gray, he couldn't fire me without risking another artistic protest. But I should have known that Apex wouldn't take this lying down. The coup happened on a Tuesday. I arrived at the meeting to find the door locked. My keycard didn't work. I knocked. Vance opened the door. He was smiling. It was a shark's smile. "Mark," he said, "we won't be needing you today." "I'm on the board, Sterling." "Not anymore," he said. He held up a piece of paper. We checked the bylaws, specifically the residency requirements. He pointed to a highlighted paragraph. "Board members must be members in good standing. A member in good standing is defined as a homeowner with no outstanding violations or liens." "I don't have any violations," I said. "I painted the roof. The snake is compliant. The window is federal art." "True," Vance said. "But we did a survey. A very, very deep survey." He pulled out a photo. It was a close-up of my driveway. "Your driveway," Vance said, "has an oil stain, approximately 4 inches in diameter. Bylaw 6.3. Driveways must be free of all stains, cracks, and debris." I laughed. "An oil stain? You're kicking me off for an oil stain?" "It's a violation," Vance said. "You are no longer in good standing. Your seat is vacated. We've already appointed your replacement." He stepped aside. Walking out of the conference room was Karen. Karen. The woman from the stained glass window. The woman with the binoculars. She was smiling. She was wearing a blazer. "Hello, Mark," she said. "I think we have a lot of work to do. There are so many unauthorized colors in the neighborhood." Vance slammed the door in my face. I stood in the hallway. I heard the lock click. They had got me on a technicality. An oil stain. I walked to my car. I looked at the driveway of the Apex office. It was pristine blacktop. I drove home. I pulled into my driveway. There it was. A small, dark smudge where my old truck had leaked a bit of oil 3 years ago. I stared at it. They wanted a pristine driveway? They wanted to play hardball over asphalt? I picked up my phone. "Vinny." "Yo." "How much is gold leaf?" "Excuse me?" "Gold leaf or gold epoxy. Industrial grade. I need to resurface my driveway." "Mark," Vinny said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "They fined me for a stain," I said. "They want the driveway to be free of stains." "They didn't say it had to be black. I want to plate the entire driveway in gold. I want it to shine so bright that satellites pick it up as a solar flare. I want to drive my car on the yellow brick road." "I know a guy who does metallic epoxy flooring for casinos," Vinny said. "It's expensive, it's tacky, it's perfect." "Do it," I said. "And Vinny?" "Yeah?" "Make it slippery when wet. I want Vance to slide all the way to the street next time he tries to serve me papers. The rumor mill in Oak Creek is faster than fiber optic internet. By the time the cement mixer truck arrived, everyone knew something was happening. But nobody expected the gold. The process involved grinding down the top layer of concrete, removing the offensive oil stain, and pouring a base coat. Then came the metallic pigment. Buckets of shimmering, swirling, pearlescent gold dust were mixed into clear epoxy resin. Vinny and his crew poured it like they were icing a cake. They used squeegees to spread it. It wasn't just yellow. It was gold. It had depth. It shimmered. It looked like molten bullion cooling in the sun. When it cured, it was hard as a rock and shiny as a mirror. I stood at the bottom of the driveway. It looked like the entrance to a palace. It reflected the sky, the trees, and the angry face of Karen, who was standing across the street. I walked up it. It felt regal. I parked my beat-up Ford F-150 on it. The contrast was breathtaking. The notice came within an hour, hand-delivered by a courier. Violation, non-standard driveway material. I was ready. I walked into the board meeting that night, uninvited, and slammed a binder on the table. Bylaw 6.1, I announced before Vance could call security. Driveways must be paved with concrete, asphalt, or approved hardscape materials. Definition of hardscape: man-made features used in landscape architecture, such as paths or walls. It's gold, Mark, Karen shouted. Come. It's ridiculous. It is a metallic epoxy sealant, I corrected. Commonly used in high-end garages. It seals the concrete. It prevents oil stains. You wanted no stains? I gave you a stain-proof surface. You can eat off this driveway, Karen. I invite you to try. Vance looked at the binder. He looked at me. It reflects light, Vance said. It's a hazard to navigation. I checked with the FAA, I said, pulling out a letter. We are below the flight path threshold. And as for drivers, it's no brighter than a wet road. Technically, I've improved safety by increasing visibility. Vance rubbed his eyes. He looked tired. The crisp corporate shell was cracking. Why? Vance asked. Just why? Because you took my seat, I said. Because you think you can algorithm us into submission. But here's the thing about algorithms, Sterling. They hate outliers, and I am the biggest outlier you will ever meet. I leaned over the table. I have plans, Sterling. The driveway is just the beginning. I'm looking at my siding next. Did you know there's a paint that changes color based on temperature? Thermochromic pigment? My house could be blue in the morning and pink in the afternoon. Imagine what that does to your uniformity clause. Vance turned pale. What will it take? Vance whispered. To make you stop. I want the HOA dissolved, I said. The room went silent. Not just the committee, I said. The whole thing. The covenants, the restrictions, Apex leaves. We go back to being a normal neighborhood where people talk to each other instead of suing each other. We dissolve the corporation. That requires a supermajority vote of the homeowners, Vance said. Regaining some confidence. 75%. You'll never get it. Most people are sheep, Mark. They like the rules. They like the property values. Do they? I asked. Or are they just afraid of you? I stood up. I'm going to run a campaign, Sterling. I'm going to rally the troops. And I'm going to do it from my golden driveway. The campaign for the dissolution of the Oak Creek HOA was the most intense political event the county had ever seen. I didn't use yard signs. Yard signs were regulated. I used projection mapping. Every night, I projected "Vote Yes to Dissolve" onto the side of my house. Since it was light, not a physical sign, it fell into a legal gray area that David, my lawyer, assured me would take 6 months to litigate. I hosted barbecues on the golden driveway. Vinny came and grilled sausages. We handed out flyers. I pointed out the savings. $300 a month in fees, I told the neighbors. For what? For Linda to measure your grass? For Vance to buy new suits? Imagine what you could do with $3,000 a year. Mrs. Gable was the first to flip. She wanted to keep her giant cherub fountain. Then the Hendersons flipped. They wanted to paint their shutters purple. Then the guy 3 streets over, who had been secretly building a boat in his garage for a decade, joined the cause. Vance fought back. He sent scary letters. He threatened that property values would plummet, ironic considering he had already tanked them. He claimed the neighborhood would turn into a shantytown, but he underestimated the power of the spectacle. The stained glass window, the metal snake, the invisible hole in the roof, the golden driveway. I wasn't just a nuisance anymore. I was a legend. I had shown them that the rules were fragile, that authority was an illusion maintained by paper tigers. The vote was scheduled for November 1st. We needed 200 votes out of 260 homes. On voting day, I set up a polling station in my garage. I had a notary present. Vance stood outside, watching. He looked defeated. His Escalade was dirty. One by one they came. They walked up the golden driveway. They admired the snake. They waved at the burning image of Linda in the window. And they voted. At 8 p.m., we tallied the count. 201 votes. We had done it by a margin of 1. I walked out to the driveway. Vance was waiting. "You won," he said. He didn't sound angry. He sounded relieved. "I'm fired, you know. Apex lost the contract." "Sorry about that, Sterling," I said. "Don't be," he said. "I hate this neighborhood. You people are insane." He got in his car and drove away. I stood there. The silence was heavy. But it was a good silence. It was the silence of freedom. Linda's door opened across the street. She stepped out. She looked at me. She looked at the driveway. She didn't say anything. She just shook her head, turned off her porch light, and went back inside. 6 months later. Oak Creek is different. The Hendersons painted their house teal. It looks hideous. I love it. Mrs. Gable installed 3 more fountains. Her yard sounds like a water park. Someone down the street is raising chickens. I get fresh eggs on Sundays. My house is still the centerpiece. The golden driveway has become a bit of a tourist attraction, which is annoying. But I charge $5 for selfies, so it pays for the beer. Damn. The snake is rusting nicely. It looks ancient now. The window still glows every night, a reminder of the tyranny we overthrew. I was sitting on the porch with Vinny. We were drinking iced tea. "So," Vinny said, "you're a free man. No rules, no HOA. You can do whatever you want." "Yep," I said. "No more spite projects," Vinny said, sounding a little sad. "No more battles." I looked at my house. It was perfect. It was a monument to chaotic good. "I don't know," I said. "I was looking at the city ordinances yesterday." Vinny perked up. "Yeah? Did you know," I said, "that the city has a zoning law about maximum height of amateur radio towers?" "How high?" 50 feet. And, I smiled, "it doesn't say the tower can't be shaped like a giant middle finger." Vinny grinned. He pulled out his sketchbook. "I'll go get the welder.